Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. Isn't it incredible with spring around the corner? You'd think we'd be warm, wouldn't you? But it's been so cold, so that's not very funny. But I hope that it's going to be around the next corner soon and we're going to be embracing warmer months. But before we get started, I just want to tell you that this is a lovely story. And so if you haven't seen part 1, you really do need to go to it because you'll be missing out so much. This is part 2 of the story and you're going to just love it. It's absolutely gripping. And love to each and every one of you, as I was saying. So go and get that gorgeous drink. So let's get started. Back to Teddy. The following morning I wake up to find my sister is no longer lying in my bed. But she had been there during the night. I know she had. When I confronted her, she denied that she had climbed into my bed the previous night. Perhaps she was embarrassed about it. But she always did that when she was younger, when she was feeling afraid. And I knew she'd been there. When I asked her to expand upon her date with Dennis, she shut me down, merely saying, "This Dennis character was what she suspected to be a narcissistic personality type. And no, she didn't want to see him ever again." "Happy now," she said. "You were right, his flavour did not complement his appearance, like your chocolates, but I couldn't get any more out of her." In the cooler days that followed, the pendulum of late summer was now swinging closer to autumn, and it was getting significantly chillier. I did notice a pronounced change in my sister's demeanour, almost as if the remnants of her callowness were being swept away, like the dust on a patio porch, to be overtaken by a wary reluctance. I wasn't sure if I actually liked that. By all accounts, it was a cosmical relief to me, to perceive that Juliet's desire to randomly date a perfect stranger had somehow lost its illustrious appeal. I was beginning to believe that my sister's life was now peppered with a fiery worldliness that had burnt away her former ignorance, awaking her to the stark reality that not everything in this world is benevolent. Perhaps, against all odds, her date with the tall, ambiguous, dark stranger had turned out to be a blessing in disguise, after all. It was like after one date she'd actually grown up a little. The dredges of her innocent, whimsical naivety that had clung to her for so long like seaweed anchoring itself to an ocean rock had been washed away with the high tide. Even my parents had noticed the changes in her behaviour. She was much less inclined to be impulsively spontaneous, but was always more sagacious when it came to recruiting personal decisions. It would seem the human with 9 lives, much like a tabby cat, had judiciously decided to retire from her childish ways, relegating them to the back burner, climbing up the ladder of self-awareness and personal growth. I was glad to see my sister blossoming, like a tree in spring, welcoming a more pronounced wisdom into her life that I knew would serve her well, not that she didn't still have a lot of learning and growing to do. Our Staffordshire Bull Terrier at the time was called Thor, named after the Norse god of thunder and lightning in Greek mythology. I'm not exactly sure why he acquired that name, as Greek mythology has not been a subject that carried much intrigue with my family over the years. Needless to say, in an irony of all ironies, I've never seen a dog that was more petrified of thunder. But let's just say it was this unlikely tan and white hero who saved my sister's life one inauspicious bodeful autumn night, when the whole family had retired to bed early to enjoy a good night's sleep. It had become a little chilly. The indelible signs of autumn were abundantly pronounced, as trees had been shedding their leaves, some more reluctantly than most, as they were self-consciously less inclined to embrace such naked immodesty. Pavements were strewn with a plethora of golden leaves that carpeted the sidewalks in a glorious ocean of gold resplendence that would force you to take a second look. It was that beguiling. Some tree branches had already retreated from their summer wardrobes and had wilfully unleashed their leafy loads onto the ground, with their barren, stripped and bare sculptural branches rising up proudly from a secure base of sturdy, rooted foundations into a cobalt blue sky. Their burnt sienna branches, like a profusion of bronze woody arms, waving up to the heavens, celebrating the freedom of relinquishing their viridescent finery that had weighted them down during the summer months. Of course the weather had changed quite dramatically, Summer had dashed away so fast, like a furtive robber, as if it could not escape fast enough. It would seem her searing hot summer days were all but a fleeting memory. Some of those scorching days we had endured were most gladly forgotten, and thankfully long behind us. Of course the bright, incandescent summer lighting had drifted away like a child's paper boat bobbing down a meandering stream, left to the mercy of a swift current, while the autumn herself welcomed a much more floating, ethereal, soft gossamer light. I think most telling of all was that people's regular cotton garments had quickly been exchanged with more appropriate warm sweaters. There was a very definite Arctic biting chill in the air, and even our nightly visits from the raccoons had ceased, as their clandestine burrows had beckoned them to a safe and warm hibernation, of which they had been wise not to refuse. My mother was to tell me that the moment she heard my sister's loud screams echo through the house that ill-fated, infelicious, uncongenial night, she knew that they were her daughter's screams, for a mother is so biologically connected and acquainted to the familiarity of her own children, that when one of them is in distress, she told me, you feel their aching terror in every muscle, bone and sinew of your body, as if the fear has now become yours. My sister's screams jolted my mother violently out of her deep dream state, flinging her through the windscreen of wakefulness. In a beat of a second, she knew at once something was so terribly wrong. Her daughter was in perilous danger, very grave danger. The impending tone of that scream expressed within its portentous frequency. She knew my sister was in trouble. My mother found herself galloping down the upstairs passageway, towards my sister's room that overlooks the front yard. It was the furthest room, situated at the far end of the passage. Boy, did my mother run, as if her feet had suddenly grown wheels, followed by my father, who had reached out quickly for a very sharp fisherman's knife that he surreptitiously kept in a bedside drawer. And then there was me, trailing behind. My response to that scream had been insanely different, and several minutes delayed, as the moment I heard that tenebrous scream, a palpable fear drilled through me, and for a few seconds I froze in terror. Then there we were, all three of us, gathering around in my sister's bedroom, like the spectators at a bullfight. It was dusky in my sister's room, but with a press of the light switch, a horrifying, lugubrious scene unfolded before our eyes. Our Staffordshire Bull Terrier was growling at this strange man, occasionally tearing off the fabric of his shirt, and sometimes thrusting his sharp incisors into the man's skin, where he cried out in pain, as the revengeful blood seeped out of his open bites, spraying and spattering a plethora of crimson blood over my sister's floor, like a spray can of red paint. The young man was so petrified by our Staffordshire Bull Terrier, as Thor knew this man's intentions were nefariously evil. He refused to let go of the man, gripping his arms savagely with his teeth, sometimes releasing, then snarling, unleashing the most terrifying, threatening growls that would terrify the most courageous among us. "Dad! He tried to smother me with a pillow!" cried my sister. "He tried to kill me!" I'll never forget my father's face. It was consumed with a fury that would make a treacherous lightning storm look like a picnic in the park. Never have I seen an anger settle on a man's face, as it did upon my father that night. My father grabbed the man by the collar, shaking him so violently hard, so that his whole body wobbled, shuddered, heaved and shook. His eyes were round with terror, but no words came out of the man's mouth. But the putrid, bitter stench of a sweat seemed to perforate the room, which I'm informed is the smell of fear itself. My father was holding the powerful blade, raised above the man's torso. It looked almost as if any second he was going to plunge the knife into the man's heart. You were trying to kill my daughter! You were going to smother her with that pillow! How dare you! How dare you! How dare you! You touched my daughter! Who the hell do you think you are? I will make sure that the police lock you up for the rest of your life. I grabbed my cell phone. I was quickly calling the police, informing my father not to kill the man, for I was almost certain he would do just that, as his fury had hit the roof. I did not want him to end up behind bars for killing a man who had become like putty in our hands, as his fear over our Staffordshire Bull Terrier was all-consuming. But who was this enigmatic stranger? Why had he come so close to eclipsing my sister's life from her? There was only one hero on this night, beyond question. Thor, our Staffordshire Bull Terrier, whom had saved her life. Without his intervention, this man would have almost certainly killed my sister. As he slipped silently through her bedroom, grabbing a pillow to smother her, I was to learn he'd gained access to our home after fiddling the lock of our kitchen door. He had skillfully crept into the house through the back, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce on his unsuspecting victim, whom he was desirous to kill. Back to Juliet. After that date with the insidious MacFodder character, something inside me almost certainly shifted. I think I came to the horrifying revelation that although most people are inherently good, there are a scattering of people in our world that most certainly are not, and that my brother was absolutely right, that after surfing these dating sites, sometimes if you're not careful, you may find yourself balancing on a very shaky, precarious wave that could so easily seize you, shake you violently, bury you beneath the ocean, holding you down so powerfully that you lose the fight within yourself, until you surrender to its charge, unwillingly becoming another victim of its wrath. Needless to say, my friends were very much more astute than I was, but then that wouldn't have been very hard, would it? They were always accusing me of being ignorantly naive. Of course, they were absolutely right. My sharp-witted, shrewd friends always ensured that dating a stranger online began in a safe public spot for them, where they would first meet for coffee. But I had ingenuously bypassed all those safety precautions and put my hands straight into the electric socket. It would seem that Dennis MacFodder had taken my rejection to his advances far from favourably, and had assured me I would pay a hefty price for having offended his male ego by abandoning his advances. A couple of months slipped by seamlessly as autumn drifted into winter. I began to physically relax. Dennis MacFodder's idle threats had not come into fruition. If he was going to lash out at me in some way, then it would surely have happened a long time ago, would it not? The worry that had clung on to me throughout the autumn and early winter soon loosened its tight grip on me. I felt certain I was no longer under the threat of this conceited, duplicitous character, but I'd underestimated Dennis MacFodder in every regard. As much like any predator, he would unleash his attack on me when I was not suspecting it. So when I retired to bed on that freezing cold winter evening, I was blindly oblivious about what was shortly to transpire. I was reading a novel. I switched off the Tiffany reading lamp on my bedside table and slipped into a deep sleep. It was when I opened my eyes to see Dennis hovering over me with a pillow and a glinting silver knife in my hands that I was aware of what was happening. There was enough moonlight filtering through my room for me to absolutely know that this was Dennis MacFodder, who had come to seek his revenge upon me. I realised this was revenge on the highest level. This man wanted me dead. The next thing I know is that he thrust a pillow over my face to suffocate my airways. I try to fight him off with all my might and strength, pushing, beating, kicking, but he overpowers me. He's so much stronger than I am. "You bitch," I hear him saying in a raspy, whispering voice. "This is what you get for rejecting me." I suddenly hear these vicious growls as our faithful, devoted dog gallantly comes to my rescue. He quite literally saves my life. He nips, growls, and bites Dennis MacFodder, who's so terrified of Thor that the pillow is loosened from my face and falls onto the floor, while the silver knife follows behind, tinkling as it hits the ground. I scream. My screams echo through the entire house, arousing my family from their deep slumber. 2 years had gone by since that incident, as time does have an extraordinary way of marching along very nicely indeed. Of course, I'd never forgotten that fateful night, for a memory like that is not easily forgotten. I remember Dennis's wide eyes as he breathed over me, his breath smelling strongly of whiskey. His hatred so palpable I could feel it as he pressed the pillow against my airways with a brute force. I knew then I was dead. I wasn't afraid of dying. I knew there was life beyond the vessel that contained my soul. But I wanted to live. I really wanted to live, and this man had decided, as I had rejected his advances, that I almost certainly deserved death. I remember he told the judge during the court case that he'd been looking for me all his life, that he had decided he wanted to marry me, and so when I rejected him, it was more than he could bear. I deserved death. Needless to say, he was charged with attempted murder, was given life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Little did I know that the repercussions of this event were not entirely over yet. Once again, it would come back to bite me, like the proverbial boomerang. At the time, I was working in Portland as a dental hygienist, and it was a job I thoroughly enjoyed. As odd as it may sound, removing plaque from people's teeth brought me a great measure of pleasure. I enjoyed lifting off the debris, restoring the pretty white smile to people's faces again. It was the end of a long, grueling day of work, after which I'd worked on about 6 mouths, one that had come into the surgery at 5:30 in the afternoon, as I had agreed to do a late cleaning on a very busy client of mine. Once I'd finished locking up the surgery for my boss, it was dark when I ventured into the car park. Suffice to say, mine was the only car remaining in the lot. It was tenebrously dark when I ventured into the car park. Suffice to say, mine was the only car remaining in the lot outside the surgery, but with several street lights anchored on the edges of the street, I could see clearly. I get to my car and discover that all 4 tyres have been viciously slashed, and all I can think is, bloody hell, what happened here? I pick up a piece of paper attached to the windscreen wipers that is waving ominously in the wind, and in bright red blazing capital letters I read, "I know what happened on this date. 2 years ago today. I have not forgotten." My blood runs cold. I see the ominous message. Today is the anniversary of the day when Dennis had broken into our home by way of picking the lock of our back kitchen door. He had nearly killed me, if my life had not been fortuitously saved by our Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Earlier this morning I had received a parcel that had been delivered to the surgery, addressed to me. It was so beautifully wrapped, glamorously adorned with a plethora of expensive pink and white ribbons. My enthusiastic work colleagues, both dental hygienists like myself, had gathered around me eagerly, anticipating that this surprise gift was from the lovely man I'd been dating over the last 6 weeks. A man called Pierce Gosnell. My face was heating up, my cheeks burned with a blushing excitement, my heart fluttered with a breezy enthusiasm. Ostensibly the box was so beautifully wrapped. I carefully pulled away the ribbons, cut open the box with a paper knife, and studiously pulled away the pink tissue paper to inspect the contents. My heart began to throb. I let out a stifled scream. The square box contained a large pig's heart, which appeared to be beating, but that was because a vibrating mechanism had been submersed into the flesh, so that the heart was methodically beating up and down. A knife was plunged into the middle of the pig's heart. There was a note in red capital letters that read, "Don't say you haven't been warned. If I were you, I would watch my back, and maybe my heart too." "What the hell?" said my friend Willow, looking at me with an aghast expression on her face. "Who would send you such a ghastly gift? They've got to be seriously sick, deranged." It must have been 3 hours later when a florist delivered me a wreath with a message that read, "In loving memory of Juliet Mackenzie." It is the most horrifying feeling to receive flowers like that. A funeral wreath addressed to myself, designed for my coffin. There was a huge pit in my stomach. Who was doing this to me? I think I was too befuddled to be afraid, so I was encouraged to file a police report, which I did later that afternoon. I knew if my brother had an inkling with what had been going on, he would have a coronary. There is no doubt about that in my mind, so I didn't tell him a thing. After my grotesquely sick gifts that I'd received earlier that morning, that had left me feeling more than a little disconcerted, my work colleagues, who were very worried about me, insisted I didn't work late that evening. Willow had begged me to take over my last appointment for me, but I refused to be a wet blanket, or to allow the idle threats from a vindictively hostile character out there, who was trying his utmost to scare me half to death, to carry any weight with me. I was made of sterner stuff than that. I refused to be intimidated and subdued by such fear-mongering and steam-rolling. Then it happened again. My stoic, impassive confidence was now waning. I sensed someone was out to get me. I stared down in obsequious horror at all 4 of my tyres that had been maliciously slashed, sending out a very bleak but clear message to me indeed. I could read between the lines. I could sense someone was trying to scare me, and it was working. I knew this was the anniversary of the day that Dennis MacFodder had tried to kill me, and had not succeeded. It would seem someone that was affiliated with Dennis MacFodder was out for revenge. I pondered as to who it could be. I had a faint memory of Dennis telling me that he was close to his brother, and that memory ignited in my mind. I tried to reflect on the trial. I paged attentively through the memories of my mind, like the books in a library, trying to remember faces. Surely Dennis's brother was at the trial. But regretfully, my itching memories are not generously forthcoming. I wear a nonplussed, vexed expression upon my face, as I study the tyres much more closely, examining the damage. A sweeping fear pummels my body, like a feisty, thrashing wind. I decide to call for an Uber taxi to get home. I cannot call my brother. He would freak out and accuse me of being insanely naive and nonchalant, and not paying any attention to the surreptitious threats being launched at me, like silent missiles. In the morning I would deal with the problem of the slashed tyres, but not now. I couldn't face doing it now. It's far too cold for that, and it's been a long, drawn-out day. Exhausting. It was also so cold, my body was freezing, every cell in my body begging for warmth. I was looking forward to having a soak in a long, warm bubble bath while drinking a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon to relax me. All of a sudden, my cell phone vibrates in my pocket. The phone rings. I glance down at caller ID. I smile. It's my boyfriend Piers on the phone. I answer my cell to be greeted by Piers's familiar, reassuring voice. I had met him not so long ago at a bar with friends, and from the moment we had met, there had been a pronounced chemistry between us. We had locked eyes, and he had given me the brightest, biggest, warmest smile. I had smiled nervously back at him, as I am inclined to be somewhat self-effacing. The stranger was exactly my type, tall, dark and handsome, with aquamarine eyes, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of déjà vu, almost as if I'd seen him before. I suppose it hadn't surprised me that he had a cheeky, potent, audacious confidence about him, as assertive men like him can afford to be so sure of themselves. I'm quite sure he had never been brushed off by a woman a day in his life, as beyond his debonair good looks he seemed to exude a plethora of charm, and that steely, determined tenaciousness that most single young woman would find almost irresistible. "Hello, Piers," I say, retrieving my cell phone from my purse. "You won't believe it. I'm in a spot of bother. I've had the lousiest day. Someone's actually slashed all 4 of my tyres. Can you believe it?" "That's terrible. Are you sure you're all right?" "I'm fine. Only a little flustered. You don't think you could pick me up, do you? Take me back home? I would really appreciate it. I would call my brother, but if he knows what's happened to me today, he'll not only have kittens, but he's likely to recruit an army battalion to guard me. Of course, if it's any trouble, another option is to call an Uber." "I'm on my way. I'll be there in 5 minutes." My heart flooded with relief, and Piers was there to pick me up in record time, giving me a huge, warm, affectionate hug. He examines the damage to my tyres, with a grim look on his face. "It looks like someone is sending you a warning message. This is definitely personal. Have you upset anyone recently?" "I'll tell you about it in a second," I tell him. "I think I know what this is all about. I'm slowly but surely putting the pieces together. Whoever is doing this to me wants to scare me half to death. But I'm tougher than I look. My mother describes me as the cat with 9 lives, so you could say I've overcome tougher scenarios than this." I climb gratefully into the car seat and sink into the seat next to his. "What's all this about?" says Piers, as he starts up the engine, rolls down the street. "It's complicated." I proceed to tell him about what had happened to me 2 years prior, and how the narcissistic Dennis had tried to smother me with a pillow during the night, simply because I'd refused his advances, and how 2 years later, on the anniversary of the day he broke into my family home with the intention of murdering me, I had now received some nasty deliveries at my work, along with 4 slashed tyres, and a note reminding me of today's date. As if I could ever forget that. Not a chance. "You never told me any of this before," said Pierce, looking at me curiously.
"That must have been one hell of a scary night for you. You're a lucky lady to have survived that ordeal. If I didn't know better, I would say someone either wants you dead or to scare the living daylights out of you. You definitely need to watch your back."
"Believe me, I've been through much worse than this. I think it's my friends at work that will be having nightmares tonight, not me. I think someone really wants to scare me. But if they'd wanted me dead, they could have attempted to kill me a long time ago. 2 years has gone by. They could have done something before then. I think they want me to remember this inauspicious date. I roll my eyes. Please, you don't forget a date like this. It was the first thing I thought about when I got up this morning. I didn't need any kind of reminder."
"Even so, who would do such a macabre thing? Someone is clearly very upset with you. Has it not occurred to you that you might be in grievous danger, especially after all these ominous things that have been done to you on the same day? There's a psycho out there that clearly wants revenge. The insidious presence you received may not be as benign as you think. I'm just saying."
I'm silent for a moment, drawing in a deep breath. "I think it must be his brother that's doing all this," I say. "I do remember he told me he had a brother. They ran away from their draconian parents when they were about 15 years old. By all accounts, they were exceedingly close. Maybe the brother, I know his name's Tom McFodder, is extracting some kind of revenge on me, as his brother is locked up for good, hypothetically because of me. Of course, that isn't true. His brother was the one that tried to kill me. That's what you get for attempted murder. In his case, it was life imprisonment without parole. So that monster thankfully is behind bars. My brother would have liked him to receive the death penalty, as would my parents, but it was clearly not to be."
"And you would have liked him to receive the death penalty?"
"I don't have strong feelings about the matter. Him being locked up is good enough for me. Every day he'll be reminded of what he's done, and why he's behind bars."
"So you believe this Tom McFodder is behind this curious, gruesome present-giving that was sent to you today?"
"I think so. But the truth is I don't remember seeing him at the trial. But he must have been there."
"I'm surprised you're not trembling and in tears. Most women would be freaking out after what happened today to you, but you seem remarkably composed. I must admit, it is rather bewildering to me."
"My brother would say exactly the same thing. He would say I was being terribly naive. He's accused me of that all my life. He's right a lot of the time. He says I tend to walk through dog turd like I walk directly into danger, and I never see it coming."
"Would you like some hot chocolate?"
says Pierce, pointing to the portable thermos mug standing in the round slot of his car, designed especially for drinks.
"I thought I'd bring some along for you, given the dreadful shock you've had. I've made it very sweet."
He passes me the thermos mug. I drink the hot chocolate. It tastes so delicious. I drink it back, very gratefully. "Piers, you're such a sweetheart. Right now I can think of nothing better than enjoying a warm cup of cocoa." Within minutes I find myself becoming tired. I don't remember anything more after that. I must have just drifted off into a sleep. I awake to find myself shivering with cold, although my body has been slipped into a long sleeping bag. I think it's the icy temperatures that have awoken me. Where the hell am I? I realise I'm not in my bed, and this haunting reality jolts me wide awake. I hear a banging sound, a heavy trowel thundering through the icy earth, and to my horror I sit up to see Pierce digging what looks like to be a large grave site in the woods. I look down on myself to see that my hand and feet are tied together with cable ties. I can smell we're in a remote forest, far away from everywhere. How do I know this? Because it feels like it's far away from everywhere. How did I get here? Then I remember the hot chocolate Pierce had given me, and how moments afterwards I was consumed with exhaustion. Had the cocoa been drugged? Of course it had. I'm not sure how to feel. It's as if every emotion has been drained from me, like the water down a plug hole. I can't believe I didn't see this coming. I thought that Piers and I had something special together, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Was I such a bad judge of character? Obviously I was. I'd walked right into this as per usual. I seemed to wear naivety on my person like a long silken evening dress that I refused to remove. I'm very grateful for the tall, evergreen, vertical trees that surround me, so richly covered in a plethora of needles,
Their dense foliage offers a good windbreak against a whistling, pounding, relentless wind that is whipping through the trees, causing their needled boughs to jiggle precariously. It's a tenebrous night, but not as threatening as it could be, thanks to open areas of the forest canopy that generously invite a bountiful silvery light to dance onto the forest floor, to arrest some of the darkness, holding it into submission, so that the blackness is rippled with light infusions. I can see there's a torchlight showering a bright light over the hole, next to where Pierce is digging. I can hear him making deep huffing and puffing sounds as he digs deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground. I expect it's exhausting work, digging a grave. For a moment, I'm sure this is a dream, but I know it's not. It's so freezing in this woodland oasis. Portland in winter is icy cold. The snow from the previous few days melted away, but I sense new snow is about to fall. Every part of my body is shuddering with the glacier, crisp, bitter temperatures. Luckily, I've got my warm windbreaker on, underneath the sleeping bag that I find myself in. But the numbing cold is still drilling relentlessly through my thermal protection, determined to have her bitter, inhospitable way with me. I've come to the alarming cognizance in a matter of minutes that this whole thing had been an entire set-up. It was no accident that I'd met Piers Gosnell at a bar in Portland. No accident at all. What I'd thought was a romantic rendezvous, a serendipitous crossing of paths, so to speak, was in fact carefully and meticulously orchestrated. I also knew that everything that had happened on this inauspicious day, the slashed tyres, the pig's heart, the funeral wreath, all occurring at my workplace, were actually sent by Piers Gosnell, as Piers Gosnell was not Piers Gosnell at all. He was Tim MacFodder, Dennis MacFodder's brother, and 2 years after the event, when his brother had failed to kill me, he was here to finish the job for his brother, so that I would disappear off the face of the earth, never to be seen again. Even my naive gullibility could discern through the cracks. This grave was being prepared in the woodgrove especially for me. I could perceive that Pierce, or Tim MacFodder, well, his next course of action was to throw my sleeping bag into the deep earth and bury me alive. I doubted he would kill me first. My blood runs cold at this very thought. I try to wiggle out of my ties that bind me, but they're so tight on my hands and feet that I know that even if I try to escape from Tim MacFodder's clutches, I won't exactly get very far. My mind is scrambled. It's screaming, think, think. But my thoughts are like cauliflower, but as buoyant as a bouncy ball, as I can't keep them steady, not even for a moment. I know without a shadow of a doubt that tonight I'm going to die. This is the day when my 9 lives have finally run out. They've expired, like the overdue books from the library. There is no angel on the other side going to be pushing me back through the nasal cavity into my body, saying it's not your time yet. This is the day that the spirit of death is hovering around in the dark shadows of this woodgrove with bated breath, as he watches me, waiting for that quintessential moment when my soul will be evicted from my body for good, when the landlord over my flesh suit will demand me to leave and never come back to this lifetime again. But I don't want to leave. I still want to live. I'm young. I hear the ground being beaten hard with the trowel as the wind continues to whip up energetically through the trees. Piers looks in my direction, and a broad grin appears on his face. He trudges over to me, dressed in warm clothing, and despite the Arctic cold, his brow is bespeckled with sweat, and his breathing is fast and furious. I can tell that the digging has exhausted him. "Sleeping Beauty finally woken up," he says, sitting down close to me on the earthen floor, with a nonchalant attitude, as if he hasn't got a care in the world. "Have you figured out who I am yet?" he asks me, his eyes growing steely. "You're Tim MacFodder," I say. He claps his hands. "Well done, Juliet. Maybe there are a few brains in that callow, unworldly head of yours after all. Your brother is absolutely right about you. You are bloody naive, Very puerile, Juliet. You're like a mouse walking into that mousetrap, straight to the cheese, and click, it's all over for you. I'm surprised for one so bright as you. That your nescient innocence is like that of a child. Most women would not have behaved like you today. Never. Your so-called bravery was just simply ignorant foolishness and unreserved veracity. He pauses as his thoughts meander down a different causeway from the subject of my naivety. I was worried you would recognise me from that trial when I chatted you up at the pub, but you never remembered me, did you?
Why are you doing this to me, Piers? This is completely ridiculous. You're going crazy.
No, I will tell you what is ridiculous, little Miss High and Mighty, Lady Juliet, is that you thought you were too good for my brother. No woman is too good for my brother. Do you hear that? No woman on this planet is too good for my brother. My brother was a king among men, my very best friend. He was my world. You stole him from me. He's locked away in a prison cell, all because of you. You don't know when you were born, having my brother falling for you like that. My brother would have given you the entire world, but you spit it out in his face. You might as well have put a dagger in his heart. That's how vicious and wicked and evil you are.
Don't be so dramatic. I went on one date with your brother. I didn't know him at all.
Tim MacFodder claps again. That's right. You didn't know him at all, did you, Lady Juliet? But from the moment you met him, you decided you were better than him. Let's see, what was the excuse you used? You're not my type. Yet you certainly thought he was your type when you contacted him on that dating website. So you're a big, fat, juicy liar. I tremble.
Tears spill down my cheeks. There wasn't any chemistry between us. Your brother freaked me out. He talked about wedding bells moments after we met. Well, he implied them anyway, as if it was a given we were going to get married. Your brother, he was seriously intense. Most people would be freaked out by that. I'm sorry, but they would. Ask any woman. They'll tell you exactly the same. No one likes it when someone comes on to you so strong.
Oh, I see. He didn't make your little heart flutter, so you decided you wouldn't give him a chance. You know what, Lady Juliet? You make me sick. Women like you make my flesh crawl. Worse still, it's thanks to you that my brother is now rotting away behind prison bars, never to see the light of day again. You did this to him. Do you think I can comfortably sit back, watching you freely living your life, while my brother is miserably contained? Inadvertently, whatever you may say, Julia, you killed my brother. So I'm going to kill you. It's a fair deal, and you deserve this.
Please, Tim, don't. Please, I beg you. Please, this is all just crazy. Can't we talk about this? I know you had a bond with your brother. I understand that. I really do. But none of this is my fault. Your brother tried to kill me. That's why he's in jail. Nothing less, nothing more.
You rejected my brother, Lady Juliet. And now I am going to reject you. But I'm also going to suffocate you, but not with my own hands. Do you see that grave over there? He purrs happily. That's where I intend to bury you alive. And we're in the middle of nowhere, so no one will ever hear you or find you, and you will be another missing person stat. But at least my brother will rest much more easily in prison, knowing that you are not breathing the very same oxygen as him. You won't get away with it, you know. My brother will stop at nothing to find me, and the presents you delivered to the surgery today speak volumes. They'll lead him straight to your doorstep, and my brother will kill you personally himself if needs must. Not if I get to him first, says Tim smugly. That can be easily arranged. I'll bury him next to you, so that the two of you can haunt the woods for generations to come. Before I know it, Tim is binding a rope around my sleeping bag, so I can't escape, although believe me, I wiggle, kick and oscillate my arms as much as I possibly can. But with legs and feet fastidiously tied, it's a losing battle for me, one that I'm not going to win. My heart is literally thundering in my chest like a church bell. My eyes have become reservoirs of water that have flooded their banks over, for my tears are like torrential showers that refuse to abate. My throat for a long while is tied, like my hands and feet are, for it's as if nothing can come out of me but just a squeak. Please, Tim, please, I beg you, don't do this. Tim, please. Tim willfully ignores me. He must be a narcissist, just like his brother, I decide. He picks me up in his arms, lowering me into the bottom of the grave, and begins to toss soil over my body with his trowel. Is this really happening? It's so surreal. It's as if I'm watching myself from outside my body, but not in the pleasant way when I had that electric shock. This is different. I begin to scream and scream and scream, hoping and praying that maybe someone will hear me. But the only sound in the forest is the wind wailing and moaning as it echoes the terror of my heart. It's as if every tree is an eyewitness to the scene, whispering among themselves about the horrors that are unfolding before them. I cry out to them, to God, to the universe, hoping beyond hope that someone will hear my inner cries.
Damn,
I hear Tim's voice complaining.
Does she have to bloody phone me now, of all times? Why does it have to be now?
He meanders out of the forest to obviously attend to a phone call, possibly to get a good connection, and of course to avoid the caller from hearing my screams, because that might be a good idea. I sigh with relief, as any delay from being covered with soil and buried alive has got to be a jolly good thing. I'm lying there helpless. It's impossible to escape from my imprisoned cocoon, of which I can only wiggle my body. I smell the rich earth surrounding me in this deep hollow. I'm still screaming when I hear the sound of heavy feet bounding up to the gravesite. Someone is coming. Oh my God! Someone is coming! Everything happens so fast at the speed of light that the only way I can describe it, as all my focus is on my survival and getting out of this pickle alive. The next thing I know is that a huge dark humanoid silhouette slips through the dark shadows like a ghost, jumping into my grave. I find my sleeping bag being wrestled with as ropes are tugged and pulled and snapped, and the binds that confined me are loosened, and I've slipped out of my sleeping bag like a lipstick from its container, as the critter drags me out of the bag in a long vertical sweep, so that the appearance of the sleeping bag remains pretty much undisturbed. I'm convinced I'm in the presence of an angelic being. I mean, what else could it be? I feel cushioned in the reassurance of a congenial, all-loving presence. I surrender to its authority. I've been pulled to my feet in the grave, and find myself looking down on the sleeping bag from where I'd previously lain, while this angelic being stuffs the sleeping bag, plumping it up, with some forest debris, working efficiently and retying the rope, so it looks exactly as it did before. I stand there in awe, watching her work at lightning speed. She's made the sleeping bag resemble my cocoon body. A clever ruse. I can hear Tim trudging back through the woods, cursing under his breath about the person he's been speaking to, who has obviously ruffled his feathers in some way.
I told her it was $200, he mumbles. What's her bloody problem? $200? That's not much. What's her bloody problem?
The creature throws me on its back, gliding quickly behind some trees, where I am put on to the gentle earthen floor to watch the proceedings, as we both are eager to see if Tim falls for our clever stunt. And he does, hook, line and sinker, as he throws soil onto the grave and looks like he's had quite enough of this job and wants to get going as soon as possible. He stamps the ground with his feet to flatten the soil above the gravesite.
Good riddance,
I can hear his raspy voice saying.
I've got rid of the bloody bitch for you, brother. Rot in hell, you bitch, you treacherous witch.
He covers the grave spot with needles and leaves. He sighs with satisfaction, wipes away the sweat from his brow, throws the trowel over his shoulders.
I can hear the familiar sound of his truck starting up. The purring engine goes away until it disappears into the night. All is steeped in silence for a long moment. It's only then that I look at the giant angel that rescued me. I'd been so intent on getting away to safety, escaping Tim's clutches with this ambiguous angelic help that had swiftly come to my aid, that I had not focused my attention on this angel. But then what is she? She's not completely human. But I know without even seeing her anatomy that she's definitely female. I think her benevolent energy is very maternal and nurturing. It is then I see through the soft twinkling moonlight that cascades through the trees, casting its illuminating ethereal shadows over this angelic humanoid being that rescued me. I realize she's a Bigfoot. I'm so astonished that I stare at her in wonderment, and I hear a voice speaking to me in my head. I'm sorry, I couldn't kill him for you. I struggle to kill anything, even the food that I eat. But he'll get what's coming to him. Don't worry about that. People like him always do. Now let's get you back to safety. I know a house close by where you can find help. I know it sounds crazy, but those were the words that I heard clearly spoken in my head. And I'm not making this up. The Bigfoot with her huge body, silvery grey hair, pyramid-shaped head, human face, and golden yellow eyes is focused on me. I have her undivided attention. She rarely wants to help me. And tonight, whether she's a Bigfoot or not, she is my personal angel. She throws me over her shoulders, sweeps me to safety, and although she doesn't have wings, I find myself being placed outside a farmhouse in record time, where a kind farmer takes me safely back home, wondering how I had ended up on his farm in the first place, but I told him nothing. The events of that surreal night went by so fast, and are tainted with both horror and wonderment, that some of the details have been lost in the battle of my mind, as there was just so much to remember, and it was so all-consuming, with a mixed bag of emotions, from fear, horror, terror, and astonishment, that I can't remember it all. But I do remember her. I will always remember her. She's in my heart, and although I never saw her again, she will stay locked away safely in my heart forever, never to be forgotten. She may have been a Bigfoot, but she was a second angel to me, after my Staffordshire Bull Terrier that delivered me from the brink of death. There is not a day that doesn't go by when she does not engage my thoughts. Sometimes she filters into my dreams, as if popping in to say hello. You'll be glad to know I returned home safely, trying to process everything for the next few days. I was reluctant to go to the police to report the strange tale. Would they ever believe me? I doubted it. They would possibly think I was as loopy as a fruitcake. Yet Tim MacFodder was out there, living a normal life, falsely believing he had buried me alive. If he discovered I was not dead, he would stop at nothing to ensure I was. I wasn't sure what to do about everything, and tossed and turned for several nights. But fate took the reins of my concern out of my hands, by graciously eliminating my problem for me. Tim MacFodder was found fatally killed in a hit-and-run. Some said it was no accident at all. People like him store up enemies for themselves, like we might collect stamps. I sighed with relief. My secret buried itself in my heart. Sometimes some things are best not shared at all, unless they can be served out in an anonymous forum like this, like a hearty meal of steak and chips, which I hope you've enjoyed. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.